Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in today's discussion on sustainable gardening for a greener future. We have several of our attendees and all of our panelists via Zoom. If you have not joined us via Zoom, don't you worry. We also will be broadcasting this via Facebook Live. Thank you so much for joining us on Facebook Live or Zoom. My name is Eira Corral Sepúlveda, and I am a commissioner of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, where we clean your water and work to prevent flooding. And since gardening season is upon us, this is a great time for us to explore the topic. Gardens are awesome. They add beauty to our homes and our communities, but many do not realize that they can also protect and improve our environment. When we make sustainable choices in how we water, how we fertilize our gardens, and what seeds we plant, we can have a really big impact on the natural ecosystems in our communities. If you're a little nervous about venturing into the world of sustainable gardening, you're not alone. I definitely would not say that I have a green thumb. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm still struggling with my green death thumb, which is why I'm relieved to know that we have great panelists that are pros. There are three great experts. First, please join me in welcoming Benjamin Cox, who is the Executive Director of Friends of the Forest Preserves. Hello, Ben, how are you?
I'm great, hello, thank you for having me.
With his expertise in natural conservation, Ben leads advocacy efforts and works to bring more resources to Cook County Forest Preserves. We also have Danielle Russell. Danielle, wave hello.
Hello.
She is the school garden coordinator of Openlands. In her role, she engages communities to design green schoolyards and activate school gardens. And last but not least, we are joined by Mila Marshall, who is the clean water advocate for Sierra Club, Illinois. Say hi, Mila.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Commissioner.
Mila mobilizes diverse networks around clean water issues and advocates for partnerships and solutions to protect our waterways. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. So we're going to get started with our first question. Let's kick it off with a question that helps us see the big picture. What does sustainable gardening mean to you, and how does it impact our environment?
Well, for me, I'm unmuted, so I'll go first. For me, the habitat for our native species that can be in the smallest little pockets anywhere in the city or in the suburbs, and the more we can do to provide space for plants and animals here in our homes, the better we will all be. You know, this climate change thing is overwhelming and horrible, and I think that this is something we can actually do, and it's not super hard, and it's something we can actually do at home ourselves and have an impact and feel like we're contributing.
Awesome. And Mila, would you go next?
Sure. So what does sustainable gardening mean to me, and what is it? I previously was the owner of an organic lawn care and landscaping company called Roots and Shoots Organic Gardening, which was years ago. It seems like so long ago. And this is before like there were multiple Whole Foods and people really knew about what organic meant. And so for me, I guess the best way to define sustainable gardening is the use of resources that are complementary to the ecosystem that your property is in. And so if you're a homeowner next to a wetland, I wouldn't be surprised if your property flooded a little bit. And I also would support using plants on your property that fall in alignment with that, with the ecosystem. And what does it mean to me? It means that we all have an opportunity to reflect the diversity of our natural area, like the identity of Chicago, and be a part of that. So instead of thinking like, this is my land, this is my home, think about how you are actually sharing it, and you're a steward, and your lawn or your garden is a reflection of the respect that you have for the broader landscape. So yeah, and it means that, I'm a part of the system, I guess is a good way to say it. I don't control it, but I help it thrive.
Love that. Danielle?
Mila's response really resonated with me because I also think of it as this opportunity that we have to interact with the earth, and what we do has an impact on not just our land, but other people's land and other people's environments. And what we do can make either a positive difference or a negative difference. And I like to think of it as kind of being in collaboration with the earth. So thinking about what does the earth need instead of just what I want, like, okay, I want my tomatoes, but also like, it seems like I do have a lot of flooding in this area. Maybe I can put something in there. Or it seems like I'm not seeing a lot of monarchs or another type of species that has been here for a while. So it's really thinking about not just me and what I want, but other people around me and other people farther in the future.
I love what you guys say, especially Mila saying that, it's about having respect for the system and working with the system. And, even though I'm a beginner gardener, I have planted some things, and usually I joke that I'm not a very good gardener, but what I do is I just plant things and then Mother Nature takes care of them, and that's that. And I think sustainable garden is a good solution for that, because I planted my milkweeds some many moons ago, and they just do everything on their own. They bloom on their own. They don't need a whole lot of maintenance. And as a beginner gardener, that's something that I really enjoy, that you're working with the system and working with some native species that are plants that are native to the environment. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about, we hear often about pollinators like bees and butterflies, and the important role that they play in our environment. In fact, I saw that we just had our first sighting not too long ago on monarch eggs on plants. So in Chicago, so I'm quite excited about that. What impact does sustainable garden have on pollinators, and why is it important to our environment?
So I had a colleague a long time ago. We were working on a refresh of our website, and we got this volunteer team that was asking us, but why is this important? Why is there work? Why is restoration of forest preserves or having plants in your garden at home important? Why? And finally she looked at him and said, do you like food? I said, yes. Well, if you like food, then you want plants that sustain pollinators, because most of our food needs to be pollinated. So it's sort of not insignificant. And she had said every other reason that made sense. And finally it broke down to that. And I think it was really, it got to the real heart of the issue. The bigger reasons are, I really love native plants and animals, and I want them to be here. I grew up in Cook County, out near corner of the county. I live down in the city now. And, I'm fortunate to have this job and do the work in the forest preserves, helping to make them better. And, I'm not a great gardener, but we did take out all our evergreens a number of years ago and went to a Citizens for Conservation's plant sale, which is right up there in Barrington, not too far from the district, or from your corner of the county, Commissioner, or where you used to live. I'm not sure if you still live out there. I'm sorry.
But, yeah, I live in Hanover Park.
Right. Yeah.
Hometown proud.
We bought all this stuff. We talked to somebody there. They said, here, try all these things. And we put them in, and everything's doing pretty well. And a few of those, a few of them not great. The other ones are filling in. There's lots of pollinators that love to use them. And that's just sort of for our landscape plants. And then a couple years ago, we started doing some gardening. My wife takes care of that, but we try and do that in a green way. We have chickens, and we have a tiny little Chicago lot, and it all works. And, we compost, and I was actually out there, I had a break. So I went out to let the chickens out and do a little compost mixing and watering. And so, we don't do it really well, but we've got a bunch of stuff and we feel good about it. And same thing, we stuck in a bunch of milkweed seeds and they pop up, and, we're just cruising along. I think at some point we probably need to do some rearranging, but if we get there, we get there. It's okay.
Thank you. Danielle?
Definitely the food piece is super important. We love our tomatoes, we love our strawberries. Oftentimes when I'm working with students, I'll ask them like, what's your favorite fruit or vegetable? And then I'll let them know, well, need bees or other pollinators to help us to get those. So that's definitely super important as we're a part of these ecosystems. And another thing with pollinators is it helps us to understand the health of our ecosystems. And if we don't have a lot of pollinators, then that shows us something about the habitat around us or other factors that are contributing to the health of our environment. Another thing is that with pollinators and other wildlife is that they have evolved for however many years in this area with other plants and whatnot. And so if we are seeing something weird going on with the phenology, or when certain things are starting to flower, that'll impact how the pollinators are interacting. And if there is a mismatch there, then that can be a huge problem for a lot of different reasons. But it also helps us to understand how our ecosystem is being influenced by climate change and things like that. So being able to have a good handle on when pollinators and other species are coming out and when things are flowering and leafing out and all these different events that they have going on, it helps us to understand where we're at.
You mentioned climate change and the impact that it's having. What are some of the things that you've seen thus far in how it affects both our native species and our pollinators?
Oh, did you want to jump in, Mila?
Oh, actually, I was asking you, but
oh, you're asking me?
I'll defer the question again to Mila, but you mentioned that, so I wanted to know if you had noticed anything, or what are some of the things that you have noticed, because I know there's plenty of things going on right now.
I'm not actually super well versed in terms of like what species are kind of mismatching right now, but I do know that it is a thing, and I will see if my other panelists who seem to might have more information on that might have anything to say.
Very good. Mila, so pollinators, bees, butterflies, you said you had your own company. How did you find them important in the work that you did for your business?
So the interesting part about Roots and Shoots was we had customers that would make requests like, we really want a garden that only attracts butterflies and birds and no bees. And I was like, what? Like, that's not possible. but as a homeowner, they thought that that was possible, right? Because you go to a store, it has instructions, it says this is what it's going to happen with the plant. But, you know, like our relationship with nature is just so peculiar. We believe that we can create this, you know, selectivity in our own spaces. And it's really interesting. And so I remember I had pitched I'll say this. All right. What color flower is the most fragrant? What color flower do you believe would be the most fragrant?
Yellow.
Okay. How about you, Benjamin? Danielle, what do you all think? What would be the most fragrant? Danielle says pink. All right. Anybody else? Purple, green?
Something
All
that
right.
has very little color.
White, right?
Yeah,
a white flower. So if we think about it, if we think about a white flower, why would a white flower be the most fragrant? And when would it bloom? Right? And so flowers, you know, they're colorful because they attract pollinators, but there's this competition between flowers. And if you don't produce color and you can't be seen during the daytime, then you bloom at what? In the evening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have pollinators that are during the day and pollinators in the evening. Like, we totally forget that this system does not sleep. Right. And now we talk about light pollution, and we understand the resources that are limited for nocturnal pollinators. And so I was constantly educating people on this system is bigger and more vast than you could ever imagine. And as we try to like specifically and strategically organize nature and have it where we want, there's some conflicts. And so it's why you get certain communities having certain ordinances or certain lights, for example, because even the presence of light will distract a pollinator from doing what it wants to or is supposed to do. It tricks them. The presence of litter, right? There's tons of research on how litter within a restoration distracts a bee, right? So if a bee, is this a flower? No, that's a bag of flaming hot Cheetos, right? And it might
They're
not
not
be a
bananas.
right. You're not going to eat that little bee. And it's like, well, what does it matter? Well, a bee only has a certain amount of energy. And if it's wasting its time looking at litter or looking at a pop can and confusing itself, it does have a negative cost to it. And so how I approached educating people on this natural system is that there are things that make us comfortable as humans, and there are things that we need to do to promote biodiversity and pollinator habitat and food webs for pollinators. And we also have to consider day and nighttime, which can come into conflict with some of the other issues like feeling safe, right? If you want to promote a restoration or help your homeowners improve their nocturnal pollinator habitat, it means that lights have to go off. And when lights go off, people might not feel comfortable. So in the past, I've had to find different conversations about pollinators and sustainable gardens that goes beyond, monarchs and migration and habitat to some more, I guess, nuanced conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle said, preach. Hey, Julie, with the pop quiz.
Yeah, thanks for the pop quiz. That was awesome. That was my second guess, and I guess it makes sense. Part of if you can't use color to your advantage, then you have to use scent to attract these pollinators. One of the things that you also mentioned was ordinances and rules that come up. So I want to advocate for our listeners to check in with their municipalities on what the rules are and how they can go about, pushing for change in their local municipalities to have policies that are friendly to our bees. Some municipalities don't allow you to do beekeeping in your own home, for example. Some municipalities don't allow you to keep chickens in your own home, which, chickens are good if you want to do compost. That is a great benefit to any compost. If you want to garden, making sure that there are policies that aren't restricting your gardening practices, working with municipal government is very important in ensuring that we can promote some of these great practices in gardening. So we do have a question from the audience, and I'm going to look here. What plants are native to Cook County, Illinois? How can people find them or order them? And do you have any tips for growing them? So who wants to take that one?
I've got some stuff, and I'm sure Daniela does too, but so the interesting and unknown thing about this part of the world is that this little place that we're in is probably the most biodiverse, which is fancy, but it just means the most number of species can be found anywhere in North America, right here, the tip of Lake Michigan. And it has a lot to do with the convergence of all these different ecosystems here. So you can have sand dunes and swale systems, and you can have prairies and woodlands and wetlands, and the northern forests are coming down, and there's all these things mixing together. And it's a really unbelievably important place for pollinators and for migratory species because of the lake and because of the location in the country, etc. So there's a book of native plants, and actually it's of all the plants in the Chicago region, but most of them are native plants, and it's this thick. It's unbelievable how many plants there are here. And there's a ton of plants available through plant sales like the ones that Openlands has, or that your native garden club might have, or a garden club that can turn you on to native species, that Citizens for Conservation. And I just saw 3 more, they're all popping up right now because they're often fundraisers. Things like purple coneflowers and, are something that most people would recognize, and those are native here. A lot of the ones you might buy at a home store are cultivated, so they're very different, but you can buy just the actual native species here. And I could go on for a very long time about all the different ones that I have out front, for example, different grasses and sedges and different flowering plants. But again, I would just encourage you to try and find that local plant sale and do just a little bit of Googling, and you'll get turned on to it really quickly. The other thing is that the Forest Preserve District, in partnership with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, University of Illinois, Extension, and some other folks has a program called Conservation at Home. And I think I might be talking more about that later, so I won't get into it, but it's a great resource for figuring out all of the native plants that make sense to grow here. And frankly, the coolest thing about them, is that once you plant them, as long as you're kind of getting it close, like I went with more woodland species here because Dan Ryan Woods is right down the street from my house. And I know that's what was here was more woods. And I knew that those woodland plants with the tree cover that I have on the street would do better. And that's what I grabbed, and it's worked out really well. And once they were first in, I watered them a little bit, but after that, I just kind of mulched regular wood chips just to keep the weeds down, and away they went. And year after year, they've expanded, and it's been great. There's not a lot of work involved, which is great.
So I would like to follow up and say that for native seeds and native plants, you might not be able to go to like your big box store. Like, don't expect to walk into Home Depot or Lowe's or Aces to find these. There's often some conservation groups or small teams that work in restorations to collect seed from the local geography. And so it's important to reflect on, like, if there's a big blue stem here and a big blue stem, in another country, for example, the genetics might not necessarily be the same. And so when we talk about sourcing locally, it's important that we have the genetic diversity that is kind of acclimated to our system. And so that's what's so fun about being an ecologist. So while I'm, a clean water advocate, I'm finishing my PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology at UIC. And if you are a grower or a gardener, there's lots of resources to learn how to engage. But for the most part, people are unaware that, Commissioner, I just wanted to highlight some conflicts with ordinances and why it is that we as the public need to be very vocal about conflicts. And so the city of Chicago, for example, has a contest for like the best garden in the city. And a couple of years ago, if you're on this on the call and you remember this, a woman actually won, and she was in the newspaper. And then Streets and Sanitation came and cited her $600 for violating the Chicago weed ordinance. And so I followed this story because it was so hilarious. She goes to court and she has a picture of her garden, and the judge points to a plant and he says, "What's that?" And she says, "That's a milkweed." And he says, "See, weed is in the word." And she was like, "What?" And so she had to pay the $600 plus like the $25 court fee. And I thought, how ridiculous. Our city is actually promoting sustainable gardening with prairie plants, one, to conserve water, right? Two, to help people connect with their ecosystem. There's no natural history that's taught in our school system, right? And it was just a hilarious conflict. And I realized Streets and Sanitation doesn't really know what sustainable gardening looks like. The judges on the bench might not know what sustainable gardening looks like, but we're pushing it without removing the barriers so that people aren't fined that $600, which is a good ordinance for managing vacant lots and absentee landowners, not people who are trying to create pollinator habitat in their communities.
Mm. Thank you guys so much for that. I also want to take the opportunity to plug the Illinois Monarch Project. If you want to get started, they also have a great list of plants that you can get started with that attract pollinators, and they will also send you some seeds. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District does work with them, and if you visit our website, we have a link where you can plug in the link and send us your information, and they'll mail you back a little seed packet with information on how to plant, and that's a way that you can get started with milkweed. So if you're looking for something to start with for free, we got you. Our next question is, in recent years, the term green infrastructure has become really common and popular. So at the MWRD, for example, we subsidize and distribute residential rain barrels, which has helped families save on water costs and mitigate flooding. Can you speak to what green infrastructure is and how we can implement it in our gardens? And we'll get started with Mila this time.
Okay, so it's interesting because I was just talking to one of my advisors about the difference between green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. Because I think people who are seeking to use landscapes to kind of manage floodwater, for example, is being planted for a specific purpose. And so I would call that green infrastructure. So when we identify, we're going to place 25 trees 10 feet apart with this, with this kind of crown to kind of intercept particulate matter, I would count that as green infrastructure, right? It's serving a purpose to remove some sort of toxin or manage a stressor. A nature-based solution might not be as engineered and as specific, but it still, solves a problem on a small scale. And so for a property that is flooding, for example, I would probably support, well, are there tall grasses that you can place in that area where the water can kind of soak up into it and then drain into the earth slowly? If you also think about trees as green infrastructure, if you want to passively cool your home, you may plant a specific tree in a specific location. You might also consider green walls, right, on the outside. So for mixed methods like painting your roof white as well as covering your home in the non-invasive ivy. Because weirdly enough, it's sold in Home Depot and Lowe's. And then also be mindful about what it is that you're purchasing. Your lawn care professional, your landscaper also might not have this knowledge. This is not something that they're required to know or to understand. If the places are selling invasive plants, they will buy what's cheapest and what's available. And so being intentional about the species that you purchase and where you would like them placed. And so that would be some of my thoughts.
Awesome. Ben?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, the forest preserves as this system in Cook County are part of our green infrastructure. And the best thing we can do for them is to better connect them up. This whole region was natural just a couple hundred years ago. For the last 10,000 years after the glaciers left, things worked a certain way. And we changed all that in a very, very small amount of time. To humans, that's a long amount of time, but not to nature. So we have these little islands all over the county that are forest preserves. We're blessed to have 70,000 acres. It's the largest forest preserve district in the state and probably the largest one in the country. It's bigger than many national parks. It's a really significant system, and it's older than the National Park Service. There were some national parks older than that, but it's, it's just an amazing thing. It's 1 out of every 11 acres in the county. But these little islands, as you can imagine, for the plants and animals are that's just what they are. They're little spots, and they have to try and figure out how to get from one to the next. So the more habitat that we can provide, and to provide, to help them to get from one place to the next, the better. And that's where our urban street trees and our, there's actually a study that just got kicked off. I got a survey about it the other day about how can we take these utility corridors and turn them, instead of just having weeds underneath, the big power lines that run through, instead of just having weeds underneath there, how can we make sure that that's all native species? Because all of a sudden you have these corridors that plants and animals can move through. Obviously, Commissioner, there's a lot to be said about water and water storage and cleaning and cooling water, slowing water down, keeping water here for a long time, and those are big moves that we're doing now. Instead of having all the water rush off a parking lot into the sewer and out to the river and down to the Gulf of Mississippi, how can we keep it here? How can we cool it and store it here? Water is a resource. It's not a waste product. And for a long time, we've treated it like a waste product. And we want it, and it's a valuable resource that we want to keep here in Chicago. And it has benefits to keep that from, to keeping it here has benefits downstream too. We're not sending our problems to someone else. So there's a lot more I could say about all that. But one question I saw here kind of connects with this. Somebody said, what happens, how much diversity do I need to have in my garden and, or my native plants? look, plant as many as as many as you'd like. Start with a few. Don't get overwhelmed by it. It can be, like I said, I was very overwhelmed, and I'm somebody who knows some of this stuff. Out in the forests are working, but to bring it home was like, oh my gosh, which ones? What do I do? And it's like, just start with some stuff. If you know somebody and they've got a few, plug them in. Mix them in with your favorite horticultural plants. That's okay too. It's not that you have to rip everything out and start over, but you can shift slowly, or you can just add the ones you like. We just wanted people to get involved and to really, have an impact in their home. And the last thing, the little bit of green infrastructure you can impact is, I have rain barrels. I never hooked them up, but what I did do, and there's a whole reason for that. But what I did do is take my downspouts out of the sewer and have them just go out into my yard. So that water's staying on my property. It's not going somewhere else. And that's huge. I tore out my sidewalks along the side of my house, not out front, obviously, and put in paving stones. That water can then filter into the ground. And this is over a long period of time. This is, it's just thinking about what I can do and the changes that I can make that might help just a little bit. If we all do that, it can have a huge impact.
For those, you mentioned water is a resource and we treat it as a waste product. And so I just want to speak to that for those that aren't aware. In our region, we have a combined sewer system. So all of the rainwater and all of the sewage that leaves your homes, industrial areas, commercial businesses, all of that goes into the same system. So that's one of the challenges, and it's why green infrastructure is so incredibly important, because when we keep water out of the sewer system, then we can retain it. It goes back into the earth. Mother Nature does her thing. She has her own way of cleaning it, and either sending it back for precipitation, or really being able to go underground, and that is very critical. So that's a little tidbit on why it's so important to us when we think about flooding. Climate change has really impacted our precipitation levels. The last 2 Mays have been historic for rainfall. We're bracing ourselves because we're not sure what this May is going to bring. Unfortunately, we cannot anticipate that things have gotten much better when it comes to climate change. So we can expect that there's bound to be some pretty heavy rainfalls coming our way. That is how climate change is impacting our region. You hear of drought in many places throughout the world, but in our region, it's the heavy rainfalls that we have been experiencing. So when you use rain barrels, when you use rain gardens, that helps to make sure that we can retain that water and keep it out of the sewer system because it's not dirty. And we can make sure that it doesn't overwhelm the system in such a fast manner where we can't keep up. Despite our many attempts through gray infrastructure development, the system gets overwhelmed, particularly at the local level in the municipalities that sometimes have older systems. We do a lot of upgrading of our systems, but in the municipal level, at the localized level, the system that feeds into our greater system can be old, and they haven't done a lot of upgrades at times. So keep those things in mind. We do have a great question from
Commissioner, before you continue, can I just highlight, you brought up CSOs, and I just wanted to kind of broaden this to connect it to home ownership and communities of color. And so using green infrastructure as a strategy for our communities that suffer dramatically from flooding is extremely important. I came across a story, and this was in 2019, about a decade of flooding in a home in Chatham. And the woman got flooded. She left her home for a week to let it dry out. And she came home and there were big, slow moving flies on her wall. And she went to her basement door and heard buzzing. And plumbers call this sewer flies. Like when the water receded, it was thousands of flies left in her property. I had never heard of this before. And so when we think about green infrastructure or sustainability in gardens, most of us aren't going to take that to, flooding backing up someone's home, resulting in like something from a horror movie. But it's important to understand that all of these things are really connected. Us learning how to plant sustainable vegetation strategically, kind of helping people understand how water flows and how we can help move the flow of it specifically, can really protect the integrity of wealth in communities of color. It is absolutely a public health issue, and it's something that we should all probably take a little bit more seriously. It's beyond just prettying our landscape. It is really a solution to multiple complex problems.
Thank you, Mila. We are going to take a question from Shira. She's asking, how vital is it to have a broad diversity of native plants in your yard versus just a few? Are more natives always better? I think Ben answered a tidbit of that.
I'd say the last part there, more natives is always better, yes. Unless they're spilling over onto the sidewalk and causing problems for folks. You know, it's really good to do some edging to keep them back a little bit. They can get tall and they're smart. When they get dry, they lay down, and that's floppy and messy for some folks. But these plants know how to deal with the different challenges of our local ecosystem. So you do kind of gotta, somebody put in big blue stem. I put a little in the backyard. I kind of want to not have it because it's too big, and you can get little blue stem, which is not nearly as big. It depends on your space, right? And someone else, I have a friend already that wants to take the big blue stem. They have a much bigger yard out in the suburbs. There's some thoughts like that to think about. And again, I put in a bunch, and some are in the front that are too big, and the ones in the back are small and you can't see them. So I'm going to do some shifting around, but I would say, yeah, more native is always better.
So a little trial and error.
Trial and error, and if you get into it, and there's some programs too where you can kind of get into a network, you can start to do some trading too, which is really nice. I've gotten a lot of plants from people giving them to me, including some prickly pear cactus, which is native to Cook County, believe it or not.
Oh, I didn't know that. No,
it's crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
I when I talk to residents about the importance of what we do and how we look at landscaping, if we can imagine everything being prairie, and now we've replaced it with development, our homes, our roofs, our driveways, commercial businesses, parking lots, and then whatever green is left, we've replaced it with short grass. A non-native vegetation that really overwhelmingly has taken over the entire country, not just the region, but the entire country. And the roots of our grass is very short, about 3 inches you might get. So they're sippers. And when you're trying to think about what we need and why native plants are so important, I call them chuggers, and we need chuggers. We don't need sippers. They love to chug that water, and they have a very intricate and deep root system. Some have roots that are even 10 feet deep. That is why it's so important that we consider adding native plants. And yes, the more the better. And you really can do it in a way that is very beautiful. You can combine different species and create something that is aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And you can even have designated monarch way stations, and you can have designated areas which then protect you from getting ticketed or whatnot. So please look into that. I have another question from the audience. This is Sandy. She just joined in, and she's heard that she should not use the rain barrels to water vegetables due to the chemicals off our roof. She is asking what the thoughts are on that. Good point. Okay. I had not heard that. So I am open to any insight that the three of you have in this question.
I'm hoping Mila.
I can say that there have been concerns about using water runoff from your homes.
Mm-hmm.
But Gardens, for example, will create a structure to collect water off of. If you're concerned about what is in your water and what's running off of your roof, there are some easy water kits and water tests that you can do before you apply that to any vegetation that you're going to be consuming. I think it's a fair concern living in a city. If you are in an industrial corridor or next to a transportation corridor or next to a factory, for example, those issues might be a little heightened in comparison to other people who live, you know, in a suburb and may not be as concerned with air pollution and particulate matter and what's on their roof. So I can definitely say that those have been some of the concerns with water reuse and coming off of your home, that we can't control the quality of the water. And of course, the plants do integrate that somewhat, or it has an impact on it, whether it reduces its yield or changes its nutrient composition. And it's interesting because we haven't heard as much concern about lead water in our urban agriculture. It's literally not been a conversation whatsoever, which I think is also something very interesting as we consider the natural environment and why we're concerned about what. Growers haven't really thought about lead or salt during like seasonal salting, for example.
I do know that when we created our beds, you know, you can get your soil tested, or you can just make the decision to build. We made planter boxes, and that way, or raised bed gardens, so that we don't have to worry about what is or isn't in our soil. Because in the city, the chances are, with the age of the homes, chances are you're gonna have lead paint in your soil, and you're just a little bit safer using other ones. And someone asked in the Q&A about planting on their, in their home. How do you start if you're doing something on your small porch on a condo or an apartment? There are a lot of different container gardening things. I bet you Danielle knows a lot about this, but little planter gardens that you could start with. You can even just start with a really basic pot and put a few things in there, like a tomato plant and a few other things that you want to try, and expand out from there. But I've seen tiered systems that are real tall, that are really great for for your deck, and you can even figure out a little watering system for if you've got some water available out, from outside, from inside. So just a handful of plants. The one trick there is you got to do a little bit more watering, because they do dry out quicker when the soil is above ground, especially if it's on, something warmer like cement or whatever your patio was made out of.
Thank you. We have a final question from our viewers. Let's see, and this is, give me a quick second. If you could leave a future sustainable gardener with one piece of advice, what would it be? And we'll start with Danielle. Huh?
I was saying, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. If you could leave a future sustainable gardener with one piece of advice, what would it be? And we'll start off with Danielle.
It's kind of a multi-tiered answer, but it's all about the soil, I would say. Just like really nurturing the soil, trying to build the soil, hashtag mulch and wood chips, to help build. It takes a long time to build soil, but it takes so much or so little to degrade it. One thing I do want to share with folks is, if you're buying soil, to look out for this little thing. That's how it's like true organic soil, because a lot of things can be considered, like they'll say organic soil, but it might not actually be that great for your soil, because then what you put in your soil eventually, as we're talking about, goes into the water, goes into the groundwater, goes and picks up hot Cheeto bags and goes into the sewer. And yeah.
I love the hot Cheeto reference in this talk, by the way, guys. Love it.
It's an urban tumbleweed.
I always talk about hot Cheeto bags when I'm talking about green infrastructure.
There's an awesome muralist in Chicago, and he always adds a hot Cheeto bag down in the corner. So, he's done a lot of really great work through this, pieces of work through the city.
Ben, advice that you would give to a future sustainable garden?
Yeah, I mean, don't overthink it and just do it. Just start, if there's some stuff in your yard that you don't like, take it out. If you don't have much on your deck or on your patio, if you've got an apartment or a condo, get a couple little planters and give it a shot, and it'll be okay. We tried to do gardening in hay bales, and you see these people and they have this great, it just goes really well for them. And we followed all the directions and we just failed 2 years in a row, totally failed. So we tried something else. It's okay. It wasn't fun. I mean, we wanted some tomatoes and I think we got a few, but we didn't get much else. And, but you learn and you get to do something and give it, just give it a shot. And that's that I mentioned earlier, that conservation at home program, and you can find that on the Forest Preserve's website. I threw it in the chat here too, but I was talking to one of the coordinators with the Forest Preserve, Nina Baki, today, and she was saying, look, the main thing we want is just for people to give it a shot, to get a few plants, send in your thing and get your free milkweed seeds. It does make a difference. Your few little handful of plants really does make a difference. And maybe you'll start to figure it out and add a few more and a few more. So, don't let it be overwhelming. I can remember I went to Wolf Road Prairie plant sale out in the west suburbs. And I just bought, a dozen a dozen little plants, maybe at the most. And that's what we could afford. And that's what we started with. And we still have some of those plants now. And that was easily 15 years ago. So it's really fun. And it's, again, it does make a difference.
And Mia, I know this is going to be hard for you to just give one piece of advice because you've got like a whole dissertation of it.
I know, I was over here like, how much can I put in the chat? I'll use the chat to say everything else. This one, I guess I'll stick with one. And this is for Shira. If you have natives on your property, specifically tell your lawn care landscaper people what to touch, what not to touch. Like if you are the homeowner, and she said that somebody like pulled her milkweed out last summer, you have to tell them, you have to educate them, you become the steward. And so whether it is your neighbor who's complaining like, it looks so ugly, it's too big, and you like tell them this is why I planted it, or it's a landscaper, or you're selling your home and people are like, oh, that's a lot of plants back there. Well, to let you know, it is an award-winning native prairie, educate the people around you for why it is your property looks how it looks. You'd be surprised how just informing people can go a very long way.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your skills with us, to our amazing panelists, Ben, Danielle, and Mila, joining us today for Sustainable Gardening for a Greener Future virtual discussion. Thank you for all of our audience members that asked questions. And before we sign off, we want to make sure that you are aware of all of the resources available to you as you set up an environmentally friendly green garden. At MWRD, we offer a variety of great resources. So take a note, we offer rain barrels. This is available on our website. We subsidize and ship to you at a reduced cost. And these rain barrels are great for conserving water, saving on utility costs, protecting your home from potential floods. You can check out our website under the services tab on our MWRD website. We also offer compost for free compost at all of our water reclamation plants, except for the Lamont location. All you need is a shovel and a bucket, and you could take as much as you want. So come on by, get your free compost. And as part of the Restore the Canopy initiative, we provide free oak tree saplings. You heard that right. They are free. They're gorgeous. They're really healthy, and you can take them home and take care of them. This is offered at all of our water reclamation plants except for the Lamont location on Wednesdays from 9 a.m. to noon. And these saplings are available from now until October, so you can plant them anytime. You plant them, put a little bit, as Danielle said, hashtag mulch and wood chips around it to create a little donut. I call it a donut blanket so it can stay nice and warm, as it's a baby tree, so you got to keep it warm, and you also have to keep it moist, so that helps with controlling moisture. And by taking the Save the Monarchs pledge, which we also have on our website, we will mail to you free milkweed seeds, which are awesome native plants and crucial to protecting the endangered monarch butterfly population. If you are interested in some of the resources provided by our partners today, please, panelists, go ahead and provide an overview of your respective resources. We also have some links to the MWRD resources. And we'll start with Danielle.
I'm sorry, I was answering a question in the chat. So I wanted to share with MWRD Openlands works on the Space to Grow program, where we are revitalizing schoolyards with the green infrastructure, capturing water where it goes, or where it lands, where it falls. So we have a resource that I will put in the chat that helps if you're interested in implementing green infrastructure at home. And also I wanted to share a resource for if you're interested in planting native plants, but not really sure what might grow well with the soil that you have, to take a look at that, because a lot of us have like clay or sand, different compositions of soil, and it might be helpful to take a look at that to consult before you plant so that your plants can be successful.
Awesome. And Ben?
Yeah, so two resources. One, I threw this in the chat just now, but if you aren't able to, do native gardening at home, you can help improve natural areas near your home through volunteering. There's lots of stewardship opportunities. There's great communities. There's folks that have been doing it at their local forest preserves for 50 years, and they've had an unbelievable impact. We've actually seen some of those places get certified as Illinois nature preserves, which is like the highest standard, the highest quality that you can get certified at for the whole state. So it gives it even an extra level of protection through state law. You can do it with the Chicago Park District, many of the regional park or the local park districts in the suburbs, nature conservancy properties. There's just a ton of opportunities to get out and help with that stuff. And actually, the other thing is some of the native plants that I got were part of a program where we would grow them at home, collect the seeds, and then take them back to the forest preserves. So that's another cool way to get some plants and to do some help, do work that really helps. I talked quite a bit about the conservation at home. It's a certification program. You don't have to get certified. You can. Many of the members of the programs are not certified, but you can if you want. Someone will come out. They'll evaluate your yard and what you've got going on. They'll give you some advice on what to do, and they'll help you with this whole process of planting natives and creating little pockets of habitat for our pollinators and other native plants and animals. Again, that program's done with the Conservation Foundation out in the suburbs, the Forest Preserves of Cook County, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and the University of Illinois Extension Service, where there's a couple of great programs there too, the Master Gardener program and the Master Naturalist program that you can get involved with. If you really are interested in these things, you can get some great training and some great certification and become part of a really cool community that, where you don't have to figure it out all on your own. And you're always welcome to reach out to us at Friends of the Forest Preserves, and we can help plug you in and on, to all kinds of volunteer opportunities throughout the county.
Awesome. And finally, Mila.
So I just dropped two links in the chat. The first is, of course, as the Sierra Club, we would love to have you as a volunteer, or if you're interested in learning how to advocate for your environment, we have lots of different campaigns for you to do so. Would love to have you on the clean water team, but please do visit that site, check out our volunteer experiences and pass on the word. And then I decided to share a little bit about Delta Institute, and I share that because sometimes we don't realize, like, yes, as a homeowner, this is what we can do, or in our network, but if you have young professionals who are interested in the environment, Delta Institute is a nonprofit that focuses on the intersection between the environment and the economy. I know we've lifted up a little bit about the role of landscapers and landscape architects, for example, and so they are open and taking applications for people that I think are no older than 35, 38. Doesn't matter the industry, but they're looking to diversify their auxiliary board to address lots of different things. So I would love to make sure to get that out to as many people as possible as a way to keep this conversation going and participate on a different level.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all that joined us today. I would like to say a special thank you to Friends of the Forest Preserves. Thank you so much, Ben. Openlands and Yale, I really appreciate you being here. And Sierra Club, Illinois, Mila, thank you for sharing your knowledge. This was a great partnership with these three amazing organizations that really lead in the space. And I look forward to seeing all of your sustainable gardens flourish this year. Happy gardening. Have a great day, guys.